Hello, fellow cyborgs, and welcome to my January wrap-up. I think I'm going to be doing these monthly this year. I really don't know. I haven't made a decision. So let me tell you about the books that I read in January. I had some really good surprises and a couple of duds. I also have 3 books that I'm not going to talk about in this video, but you'll see me talk about them in an upcoming video. It'll be up shortly. I started the year out with a wonderful reread. This is Ancillary Sword by Ann Leckie. I suppose that maybe I should have put this in a hindsight is 2020 video, but it seems to be kind of like an oddball outlier, so I'm just putting it here. I buddy read this with Sarai from Sarai Talks Books, and it was wonderful. We had such a fun time speaking about it, and I remember quite a bit of this book, which makes me really eager for the 3rd Ancillary Mercy, which I have like zero memory of. This read was cozy and familiar, and it was a wonderful way to start my 2019. Still definitely 5 out of 5 stars. I also read quite a number of audiobooks that were in my audiobook library this month, so let me tell you about some of them. I finally listened to The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. I have the audiobook when I was with Audible that's narrated by Anne Hathaway, and I decided to finally give it a listen. This was a real pleasant surprise. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. Anne Hathaway did a really excellent job with the narration and with doing a bunch of different voices. More importantly though, I was surprised at how much I enjoyed the world of Oz. I don't love the movie with Judy Garland. It kind of actually creeps me out, but the book, I actually really enjoyed the world building and the characters. I also liked how some of the characters had different backstories and different functions in the book than what they were able to translate in the movie, so it was definitely a really enjoyable reading experience. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars, and I might be interested in continuing on with the series. I also finally listened to Paro and Me by David Suchet. I believe it's also co-authored by Jeffrey Wansel. This was again in my Audible library that I just hadn't gotten to, and I was pretty eager to give this a try. I have seen all of the Poirot TV specials and TV movies with David Suchet and really enjoy them. However, my opinion of this book waned the more it went on. There were a couple things that David Suchet said in there that really dated his perspectives and were a little bit offensive towards women, and he goes into detail about the production of the different episodes. He talks about every single episode, even when nothing all that exciting happened. And he also does a lot of name dropping and talking about people complimenting him. And it kind of started to feel like humble bragging. This kind of made me want to try a Poirot book again, and definitely made me want to rewatch the series. But I think that's just from remembering how much fun I had watching the series rather than because this book actually added to that experience. So 2 out of 5 stars from me. Wasn't that great. I finally read this fairy tale collection. This is Beauty and the Beast, classic tales about animal brides and grooms from around the world, and this is edited by Maria Tetar. I don't know, but she's a big name in fairy tales, and I don't know how to say her name. I started reading this last year and put it down after a really disturbing fairy tale where the bridegroom is a pig and he tramples his bride to death because she was secretly trying to kill him, and it was really off-putting. But then I decided to pick this up because I really enjoy Beauty and the Beast tales, or the Animal Bridegroom tales, and also because I need to get it off my physical TBR, and the rest of the stories were actually really great. Even though it had some of the same sort of tropes, the fairy tales that were in from around the world definitely felt they had their place there, and the stories were translated really well, or I don't know what it was, but they were much more readable than I feel like fairy tales normally are. So this was another really pleasant surprise, 4 out of 5 stars. I then finally checked an ebook off of my Kindle, which is Finder by Emma Bull. This was one of my most anticipated ebooks. I've read War for the Oaks by Emma Bull twice and loved it both times that I've read it, even though I'm probably due for a reread, and Finder seemed to be the next logical choice in books by Bull to read, and I got it on my Kindle and then it just sat there. So this was another real pleasant surprise. This has to do with the borderland between fairyland or elfland, the land where the elves live, and the human world. We follow a main character who has a magical ability to find objects that have been lost or stolen or misplaced. It's an actual compulsion for him once his powers have been summoned. It's kind of hard to explain. But then it quickly turns into a murder mystery. And The world building was so immersive, it just plops you right in and assumes you're going to be smart enough to figure out what's going on, and you are. The characters were interesting, and it was really enjoyable. Again, this was such a pleasant surprise. I rated this 4 out of 5 stars, highly recommend, and it really makes me want to read more by Bull because I feel like she's just a really solid writer. That's why rereading authors is, a good idea. So I need to continue doing that. Then I finally finished listening to Family Parsonage by Anthony Trollope. This is an audiobook that I've been currently listening to for months, and I have the one narrated by David Shaw Parker, who's awesome. So this is the 4th book in the Chronicles of Barsetshire, and it might actually be my favorite one in the series so far. I did give it only 3 out of 5 stars, even though if I believed in half-star ratings, it would be like a 3.5, just because I felt like the narrative had like 2 really specific plots. One had to do with the interpersonal relationships, friendships, and romances, and one has to do with a character getting into really bad debt. It's mostly his friend that's in debt, and then he like puts his name on like a bill or something like that, but it's like a money like thing plot. And I found that and the characters in that part of the book were hard for me to keep straight at the beginning of the book and kind of overwhelming on information and not as interesting to me. So because I want to say 55 to 60% of the book is on like that plot line, whereas 45 to 40% of the book is the other plot line that I preferred more. I didn't enjoy all of this reading experience, but there were some parts that were just fabulous. I'm really pleased to have this audiobook off of my audiobook to listen, and also because the 5th book in this series is one of Katie's From Books and Things favorite books of all time, so I'm really eager to get to that. Though unfortunately I won't be listening to David Shaw Parker because Libra FM doesn't have the 5th and 6th where I can use a credit, and I'm not spending $90 on an audiobook. So keep your ears peeled for more Chronicles of Barsetshire talk in the future in this year. And then I got to a nonfiction that I borrowed from my library, and that was What Matters in Jane Austen, 20 Crucial Puzzles by John Mullen. This was a recommendation from Katie from Books and Things, and it is a series of kind of essays that look at minute detail across Jane Austen's novels and work. And then he kind of postulates about what these things mean. So for example, what does the weather mean? What characters never speak? What happens in scenes where our heroines aren't a part of that scene? I had assumed that each of these questions that he puzzles through, he would come to a kind of like a thesis statement that Jane Austen in her works uses this device to do this, and occasionally this, but mostly this and this. But instead it started to feel like a collection of small kind of related ideas that Mullen had about the minutiae of Jane Austen. And at the end of reading this book, I felt myself thinking, what was the point of this book? It felt very much like someone who absolutely loved Jane Austen's work and had all of these different thoughts about all of these minute details that maybe no one had thought before and really wanted to share that. But I wanted to kind of like learn something and be able to speak about how Jane uses these little things with a bit more ability. And I find now looking back that I haven't really taken away a lot from this book. The facts washed over me, and I'm not even sure if I'll be able to remember the point he was making when I go to reread these books. I don't know if that was my fault as a reader or the fault of Mullen as how he organized this, but it wasn't quite as profound and like literary world changing as I was hoping it would be. So I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Still worth the read, but I'm not really sure what to take away from it. And then I had another 5-star reading experience, and my first new 5-star of the year of 2020 of the decade, and that was The Devil's Highway by Luis Alberto Urrea. This is a nonfiction about the stretch of land that connects Mexico to the American border, and it's known as the Devil's Highway. This is a book about the border patrol that patrols this part of the land. This is also the story of the Yuma 14, which was a disaster of walkers trying to get into the United States. This is also a story about how people come to make the decision to walk across the desert into the United States, and everybody that's involved in this complex industry of walking people to the US border. The thing that I want you to take away most from this, though, is that Urrea has some of the most poetic writing that I have read in a long time. He is able to communicate not only the horror and treacherousness of the situation and the desert, but also the beauty of the situation and the desert. And even though I was reading about things that were like I could feel the heat on my skin and I wanted to drink water all the time that I was listening to this, it was still just such a wonderful reading experience, and especially listening experience. He narrates the audiobook and does a fabulous job. So this definitely made me want to read more by Urea, read more about the Latin American experience and from Latin American authors. I'm just so motivated to try new things. It also really made me confront some like stereotypes and just trash thoughts that I've absorbed living in California all of my life, the attitudes of illegal immigrants that are around me, and it's really made me check myself, and I feel like that's been really refreshing and a really important thing for me to do as well. So 5 stars for the poetry, 5 stars for the content, and 5 stars for the self-reflection, and also probably going to be part of my Curious Adventure nonfiction challenge. Link down below. So those were the books that I read in January. Because I read the Beauty and the Beast book, that took 1 book off of my physical TBR. So right now I'm currently at 18. I've definitely been reducing my e-libraries, my electronic libraries, more than my physical TBR this month, which I'm mildly worried about, but as long as I don't keep buying books, which I think I have a handle on my hauling at this point, I think in the months to come, I will do a better job of getting my TBR down a little bit more, reading those books that I currently own, as well as enjoying all the rereading I'll be doing. So let me know if you have found a 5-star read in January already and what it was. And until next time, thank you for watching and continue to be lovely.